Hi, thanks for watching Beyond Science. It's Mikexingchen. Like I mentioned before, I love swords. They are really the most noble of weapons, which is probably why the immortals use it to chop each other's heads off. But seriously, swords are typically treated as an extension of the body of its user. And I really do believe that over time, the weapon becomes one with the warrior, him or herself. It is almost like the sword itself becomes alive. And I love talking about swords and story of swords because there are so many blades throughout history that have become almost more famous than its user. And the Sword of Kusanagi is definitely one of them. But before we get into that, I just want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is a service I've been using personally for years now, and whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. The Sword of Kusanagi, the storied sword that completes the imperial regalia of Japan, is the stuff of ancient history and timeless legend, bound by gods, monsters, and the few mortals who dared wield its piercing magic. But is the Sword of Kusanagi, its very existence, part of real-life history, or is this most storied blade fashioned only from tall tales forged brilliantly into an enduring legend? For us to arrive at any form of answer, we must first take our journey back to a much earlier point in time. The Kusanagi no Tsurugi, or grass-cutting sword, makes up one of the three imperial regalia, the great treasures of Japan. Along with the Kusanagi sword, the other regalia objects consist of the regalia mirror Yata no Kagami and the regalia jewel Yasakani no Magatama. The imperial regalia is said to embody the three primary virtues central to then ancient and now modern Japanese society, while the Yasakani jewel embodies benevolence and the Yata mirror embodies wisdom. The Kusanagi sword is the very embodiment of valor. Ever since the 7th century, the presentation of the regalia objects to the emperor by a priest has been an essential element to the enthronement ceremony. The enthronement ceremony is a highly private tradition in which only the emperor and selected priests have the privilege of actually laying their eyes on the sacred treasures. Two of the three treasures, the Yasakani jewel and the Kusanagi sword, were last seen in 1989 during the enthronement ceremony of Emperor Akihito. Now let's take a minute to talk about the legendary origins of the Kusanagi sword. Before it was even known as the Kusanagi, the sacred sword carried a different name, Ame no Murakumo no Tsurugi, which translates to Sword of the Gathering Clouds of Heaven. The legendary sword's origin is one that extends to an equally legendary battle that went down between the storm god Susanoo and the eight-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi. Once in time, according to ancient Japanese lore, there existed a fearsome eight-headed serpent. And for the longest time, the monster serpent wreaked havoc on the province of Izumo. The terrified villagers were desperate and sought the help of the then exiled storm god Susanoo. Upon hearing their story, the storm god Susanoo wasted no time and tracked down and attacked the eight-headed beast. His valiant efforts, however, were in vain. Orochi proved to be a formidable beast, and the storm god was ultimately forced to retreat. Although defeated at the moment, Susanoo quickly devised another plan. The storm god's plan was pretty simple. He was gonna get each of Orochi's 8 heads drunk. And so the storm god went on with the preparations. He arranged 8 giant bowls of sake, or Japanese rice wine, to lure out the 8-headed serpent. Orochi took the bait and fell for the trap. Intoxicated and asleep, the beast was defenseless when Susanoo attacked, ferociously decapitating each of Orochi's 8 heads. And to make certain that Orochi was unable to regenerate and return, Susanoo with his sword chopped off the serpent's tails. Olden stories have it that it is in one of Orochi's tails that Susanoo recovered a sword, the Sword of the Gathering Clouds of Heaven. I mean, if you find a sword in the tail of a legendary beast, you probably should keep that. But that's not what Susanoo did. Because although a god, Susanoo was banished from heaven because of a long-standing fight with his sister Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun. Wanting to make peace with her, Susanoo gifted the Sword of Gathering Clouds to her as a peace offering, thus ending his long exile. The Sword of Gathering Clouds then changed hands once more when the sun goddess presented the sword to the great warrior Yamato Takeru, the son of Emperor Keiko, the 12th emperor of Japan. It was also in the hands of the great warrior fire that the Kusanagi extended its existence deep into the imperial line of Japan. According to legend, Takeru first discovered the sword's magical powers during a hunting expedition when a rival warlord lured him onto an open grassland. The warlord then had his men shoot flaming arrows, thus setting the grass ablaze and trapping Takeru in the fiery landscape. Moments from burning to death, Takeru drew the Sword of Gathering Clouds, and with a series of frantic swings, he used it to cut down the sword and clear a path that he can use to escape. It was then that he discovered the Kusanagi's magical ability to control the wind. Taking advantage of his newfound magic, Takeru used the sword to push the great big fire across the landscape into the direction of the rival warlord and his men. Celebrating his victory over the treacherous warlord and commemorating his narrow escape from death, Takeru changed the name of the sword from the Sword of the Gathering Clouds of Heaven to the Grass-Cutting Sword, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. And in that moment, Yamato Takeru became the first man to wield the storied Kusanagi sword. And since then, the Kusanagi bestowed upon its wielder the paramount power to be the most powerful ruler in all of Japan. It is for this very reason that the Kusanagi sword, along with other regalia objects, are presented in the enthronement ceremony when a new Japanese emperor assumes power. Of course, that's all legend, but the earliest mention of the Kusanagi sword appeared in the ancient Japanese text Kojiki. However, since Kojiki is a collection of Japanese myths, the text in it describing the existence of the Kusanagi is generally regarded less as a historical account and more as a work of early Japanese fiction. The first reliable historical mention of the sword was contained in the Nihon Shoki. Although parts of this book consist of mythological stories, the Nihon Shoki prominently contains sections that recorded real-life historical events that were contemporary to its writing. In the Nihon Shoki, it was written that the Kusanagi was removed from the imperial palace in Nara in 668 AD, after the sword was suspected to cause Emperor Temmu's ill health. After it was removed from the imperial palace, the Kusanagi was then sent to the Atsuta shrine to be safeguarded by Shinto priests. And to this day, it is believed that the Kusanagi sword remains safeguarded, as it were in ancient times, well within the walls of the Atsuta shrine in Nagoya. The sword's last known appearance in modern history was when it was presented to Emperor Akihito along with the regalia jewel in his enthronement ceremony in 1989. And even then, both imperial objects remained practically unseen as both were shrouded in packages. So whether or not the Kusanagi and the rest of the imperial regalia still exist in their original incarnations can only be the subject of wild and quite possibly endless speculations. Perhaps the only thing that holds some semblance of certainty is that these ancient sacred relics, part myth and part history in their very existence, have shaped Japan in the most real way imaginable. And this is why I love talking about Japanese ancient swords, because not only are they majestic, they all seem to be cursed. So let me ask you guys, if you were in possession of a sword, and let's say this was like the Edo area in Japan where everybody actually used a sword, and you were in possession of this beautiful, incredibly sharp sword, but then you find out the sword is actually cursed, would you still keep the sword? And before you say no, let me just sweeten the deal a little bit. Let's say the sword is cursed, but it does give you extra fighting powers. It ups your battle point by, I don't know, 200. Would you keep it then? Let's say the curse is whenever you draw the sword, it has to kill somebody before it goes back into its scabbard. So regardless where you are, regardless if you're surrounded by enemies or friends, the sword needs blood before it can be satisfied. So if those were the conditions, let me know in the comments below, would you still keep this sword? And guys, like I mentioned in a previous video, I am in the process of building my own merchandising store, so I've been working on that using Squarespace because they have really clean, super simple, beautiful templates, and the whole site is really easy to use. And again, I cannot code to save my life, and with Squarespace, I don't have to have any coding expertise, and I can create any website. The great thing is there's nothing to install, there's no patches, no upgrades ever, so if you ever wanted to start your own website, whatever it may be, definitely check this service out. And you can start your free trial today at squarespace.com/BeyondScience, and make sure you enter offer code BeyondScience at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. So guys, if you're thinking about building a website, definitely check them out. Like I said, I've been using them for years now, even before they approached me to be a sponsor on this channel, and I love what they do. So definitely click on that link, check them out. You'll also be supporting this channel, so I thank you for that. All right guys, again, thank you all so much for watching this video. I'll see you later.